Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I'm Jody, back again with my brother Steven to talk through another good story. But first, I get to share a little bit about our new affiliate book link. So if you're interested ever in buying books from any of our episodes, if you buy using our link, you get 10% off, and you're supporting independent booksellers and us, which I think is cool. So it's at bookshop.org, so all these independent booksellers can sign up together, and it's actually a really cool system, I think. So we are on board, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But I'll try to put a version of our books up on that list. But if I ever forget or there's one you want to see, I can add it. So if you ever need to, you can reach out to us at goodstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Sound good, brother?
Sounds good to me.
Questions on that? I kind of just did it.
I love it.
Okay.
Fully support.
I like that it's not Amazon, even though you do have to pay for shipping, which is a bummer. But I mean, that used to be common, and Amazon has just distorted what we think of as buying stuff online.
It really has. And I think there is something to be said about supporting actual booksellers, the individuals.
Yeah, and you can pick a specific bookstore if you want to. Anyway, it's really cool, and we'll include the link going forward. But let's do our top 5 new download locations this week. So thank you for listening, everyone out there in Hitchin, UK, Cliffside Park, New Jersey, Edmonton, Canada, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Richmond, Virginia. We appreciate you listening. All right, our story today is both biographical and legend about a man named Davy Crockett. Now, I've known his name since I was a little kid, and I got the Disney song stuck in my head this week. So, born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, I'm not going to sing it. Greatest state in the land of the free, raised in the woods, so he knew every tree. Killed in a bar when he was only 3. And for years, do you know this? I thought he was killed in a bar when he was only 3.
I did not know that.
And I was very confused because
why is he in a bar?
How did he grow up if he died when he was 3 years old? So different story, but I learned that killed him a bar when he was only 3. Anyways. Davy Crockett really was a hunter and a backwoodsman. It's true. But he was also a statesman and a national folk hero. And this is why we're doing this episode. He wrote a book. I had no idea. He wrote himself an autobiography. Who knew? And this came up randomly in some book research I was doing for the podcast, and I couldn't believe it. So we had to read it. And in case you're as surprised as I am, we figured we'd share it as an episode. So here we go. Time for a story.
In the early days of our country, the frontier started a lot further east than we usually realize. Tennessee was not yet a state when a man named David Crockett was born. A frontiersman, soldier, hunter, and legislator, Davy Crockett developed a reputation as a folk legend. So much so that even in his lifetime, others were writing books about him. Irritated by one of these books, Davy Crockett sets out to set the record straight in his own words. That is the book we are reading today.
Very good. So, Stevie, I know I kind of just pushed you into this one once I found it because I knew it existed. Like, we have to read that.
Well, this one's a lot of fun for me because a lot of the stories we do, I'm very familiar with. This is a first read, so you're getting my fresh impressions from the first time reading through it.
Did you like it?
I did. I enjoyed it a lot. And it was fun for me, too, because there are certain areas of history which I like to think I'm borderline expert in, but not this part of our history and not this part of our country. And so all of this came out as pretty new to me, which was a lot of fun.
It's history I think we all have a little bit of taste of across the board, but I don't know very many people who really are super experts in this area. I'm sure they're out there. I don't know any. And I had to look it up. So how many states do you think were in America at the time of this? So Davy Crockett lived from 1786 to 1836. He actually died at the Alamo. To tell you the ending first, I didn't know that. Did you?
Yes, because of John Wayne.
I should have known that because of John Wayne.
There's an Alamo movie that I think we watched in like my high school Spanish class. And John Wayne is Davy Crockett. And can I just say, I can only think of him as Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
On the book, this says a narrative of the life of David Crockett. And I acknowledge his name was David, but in my head, I cannot get away from Davy Crockett, which I attribute mostly to the song, I'm assuming.
I think so.
Okay.
Disney did that.
Yeah.
Because there was a movie and a show. But back to the question.
Yeah, great question. And so
Let's say at the time he was a congressman, so 1830, how many states do you think in the U.S.?
there were 13 original colonies. I'm going to say 24.
You nailed that.
Really?
Oh my gosh, 24 states in the U.S. Arkansas was the next to come on board in 1836, which was actually the year that he passed. So that made 25. So well done.
I'm
Good
ridiculously proud of myself. I've always been a good test taker.
So I think a great way to start this is actually with the preface of Davy's. I can't call him David either. It's weird. He's Davy Crockett from his book.
Should we let the listeners know also how familiar we are with the name David?
Oh, yeah. There are, 6 in our family?
It is our family name. I mean, my brother's David, my dad's David, my grandpa's David, my brother-in-law, your husband is David.
Our
there
uncle.
are mores. Usually, growing up at most family gatherings, I was the only male non-David present. So David, very important name in our family.
But they're all different. So in my mind, my dad is Dave, my husband is David, and my brother is Davy.
I love how we all have our little codes for knowing who it
and
is.
then grandpa and uncle. So it worked itself out. Don't worry. Anyway, his book starts, and I'll say there's a debate on a lot of this because he was a politician and he's writing a book about his own life in response to things he didn't like people saying about him. So I don't know how much is strictly true. And then the legend grew over time, but I enjoyed his writing. So here we go. From the author. I leave this rule for others when I'm dead. Be always sure you're right, then go ahead. Strange wisdom. Fashion is a thing I care mighty little about, except when it happens to run just exactly according to my own notion. And I was mighty nice sending out my book without any preface at all until a notion struck me that perhaps it was necessary to explain a little the reason why and wherefore I had written it. An aside to you, brother, this week I keep saying y'all and figured and wherefore.
Oh, yeah, this will change the way you speak.
I can't stop.
This is down home, folksy. Yeah.
I think he did it intentionally. 1, because it was probably how he actually spoke. And 2, I think it represented his persona.
I think it fed the legend. I mean, he was a uneducated frontiersman, was the way he pitched himself, and this kind of folksy, it reminds me of Matlock, right? This lawyer at the top of his game, but kind of leans into that down-home flavor. I think he did it as well.
This publication has smeared his name, and they have almost in every instance expressed the most profound astonishment at finding me in human shape and with the countenance, appearance, and common feelings of a human being. It is to correct all these false notions and to do justice to myself that I have written. So I don't know. I couldn't find what exactly he was responding to, but definitely in here later on when he gets political, there were some smear campaigns. There was some tricky business on both sides. So clearly somebody said something he did not like about him. So he writes his life story.
Yeah, I found it in some ways a little bit soothing because there is definitely shenanigans that occur and political shenanigans. And I don't know, sometimes we get jaded by the modern political scene. And on some level, it's helpful to me to know that it was always messed up. And we see some of that here.
Yeah, but it's dated Washington City, February 1st, 1834.
And I didn't formally look this up, but I'm assuming by Washington City, he means Washington, D.C. So it didn't even have the title District of Columbia at that time when he wrote this. It was just Washington City.
Yeah. So he does talk about his father being part of the Revolutionary War, but he didn't remember it. Too young to remember it. He speaks a little bit about his dad being a Irish immigrant, but things online say Scottish, so I don't know if he got it wrong or somebody else got it wrong, but there's just kind of mixed messages about a lot of things in his life.
And even in this book with his dad, he says an Irish immigrant, but he can't remember if he was born on the way over or once he got here. So again, there's not a lot of pretense to strict historical accuracy. It was basically the story of his life and his family as he knew it, or at least as he wanted it portrayed.
He says, my father and mother had 6 sons and 3 daughters. I was the 5th son. What a pity I hadn't been the 7th, for then I might have been, by common consent, called doctor, as a heap of people get to be great men. I don't know what he's referring to. The 7th son?
The 7th son, I assumed he was referring to, was the great and noble tradition of the 7th son being special. So this is very, very common in folklore and fairy tales, and he would have heard a lot of stories growing up, and I think there's the idea of the 7th son being important.
But being a doctor?
That one I didn't understand at all.
Yeah. A lot of the phrases he uses, I don't know what they mean. But they seem like vernacular, like common knowledge for his time.
He had some crazy episodes in his childhood, though, and he's just, again, this is just what he's choosing to share, but in the very first chapter, he talks about his uncle shooting a man because he thought he was a deer, and it was sort of that accidentally happens, and he describes his father like running a silk handkerchief through the wound, and then says he doesn't know if he lived or died, but he probably wasn't going to hide in any bushes any longer.
He lived. Nobody thought he would. And yeah, the handkerchief's a good illustration because he put it through, his dad put it through, and he could pull it back and forth through the hole. But he did live, to everyone's surprise. Yeah, he has these stories about when he was a little boy, he gets left on shore. His brothers leave him on shore, and he's really mad, but it goes bad for them. I think they wreck the canoe, so he figures they deserved it.
That's right.
For leaving him
behind.
It's all told in this very family way. That's what they were, and these are the stories he remembers. They moved a lot. I mean, this is a time of settlers, and there was skirmishes and war, and his dad eventually opened a tavern. It says a small tavern on a small scale, and he was poor. But all these wagoneers would come by. And at some point, Davy gets hired out, basically to support these wagoneers as they're transporting goods place to place. So from a very young age, he knew how to use a rifle, and he knew how to go be independent, go make a little bit of money, at least pay for his way to contribute.
Yeah, shockingly so. His father does not seem to have been a very good businessman. He seemed to really struggle to support himself and his family. He describes a grist mill that his father went in on as a partner, and it flooded and went away. He describes this tavern, which didn't do very well. And then I think when he was 12 years old, if I'm reading this right, was when his father actually hired him out that first time. And what I think it was meant to be was indentured servitude, that he was supposed to go live with this cowboy, basically, this guy with cattle, for an extended period of time. But Davy didn't like it, so he escaped and ran back home. Early on, we see that Davy is not going to do what Davy does not want to do, and he is going to go out on his own if it goes against his notions.
He had an independent streak, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's around 12 or 13, that he goes back home after being with these wagoneers for a bit, and his dad says, "You're going to school." And he's there 4 or 5 days. It says hang on, let me find it. "I went 4 days and had just begun to learn my letters a little when I had an unfortunate falling out with one of the scholars, a boy much larger and older than myself." Now, Davy plans this out. He knows he can't confront them all together because this guy's got a group, but he says he's going to give him the salt and vinegar. He ambushes this kid, totally beats him, and then he runs away from home because he knows he's going to get beat either by his dad or the schoolmaster or both. I think for about a week, he just kind of lays low. He doesn't go to school. He hides in the woods. But when he's found out, he runs.
Yeah, exactly, because he knew that the schoolmaster was going to whip him, so he just figures he won't go to school, but he leaves the house as if he's going to school, and then his dad finds out, and now his dad is threatening to whip him, and he does not want to be whipped, and so away he goes.
his dad initially chases him and is kind of hilarious. For about a mile, he keeps up, but then Davy hides in the woods and he hears his dad like huffing and puffing by. Waits for him to go back. So this kid is not afraid of being on his own, being in the woods, and he takes off to go kind of do something. He doesn't know what, not really much of a planner. His brother follows him and begs him to come back, and he's still little. He misses home, but the idea of being whipped is like, nope.
Not going to do it. Not going to do it.
Not going to go back.
And so, yeah, he keeps hiring himself out to these wagoners, or it describes that he, and actually one of his older brothers seems like he went with him on this trip, at least to start, hired himself to a man with a, quote, drove. I don't exactly know what a drove is, but he's with these wagoners and he's traveling along. And then
I thought it was like a herd of something.
That was my guess too. But there's these progressive jobs he takes during this whole excursion. He hires himself out as a laborer for 25 cents a day, doing things like plowing. I mean, he's willing to work, and he does a lot of different work. One of my favorite parts about this whole episode, though, is when he's trying to like change his clothes in the back of a wagon full of these flour barrels, and the flour barrels just go all over the place because the wagon like partially crashes. And so he's fairly certain he's going to die from the flour barrels, but he doesn't. And there is a great, great line here. He says, "But this proved to me that if a fellow is born to be hung, he will never be drowned. And further, that if he is born for a seat in Congress, even flour barrels can't make a mash of him."
Such an interesting childhood. He ends up working his way to Baltimore, and they make these deliveries there. And there's this ship, and he is taken with this ship, and he gets invited to go to London. Imagine if he had. That would be very different. But the man that he's working for basically says, "Oh, no, you're not going to London," and keeps him here. And I think it's the memory of his parents and his family that keep him as well, because at times, it says he doesn't cry often, but every now and then he has a sprinkle of tears. And when he thinks of home, but he still has that memory of the potential whipping. This lasts for years. That keeps him away.
But eventually he does work his way back. He describes people that help him, people that kind of work against him, people that work with him. But eventually he works his way back home. And again, this is how he started. He says, "But it will be a source of astonishment to many who reflect that I am now a member of the American Congress." He seems very proud of that. He keeps putting that up. "The most enlightened body of men in the world, that at so advanced an age, the age of 15, I did not know the first letter in the book."
That is amazing, because clearly he's writing this in his 40s. But at 15, he couldn't read or write at all. So the guy can learn. You definitely know that throughout this. And he's really unafraid of many things that would terrify me, honestly, to just head out from home and on my own. But and a lot of just random people, unafraid.
I said earlier that his dad wasn't very good at business, seemed to really struggle. And now that Davy is back and a little bit older, it seems like his primary job for a little while is just paying off his dad's debts.
Yeah.
He keeps going to work for these other people, not because he's trying to make money, but because his dad owes them a lot of money, and it kind of falls on Davy to get him out of trouble. And to his credit, he does repeatedly.
Yeah, he says, "I therefore returned to my father and gave him up his paper," that's the loan note, "which seemed to please him mightily. For though he was poor, he was an honest man, and always tried mighty hard to pay off his debts." And his father had several loans out, seems like. And that's kind of what Davy does for, I forget how long exactly, at least months, if not years, is work to pay off his dad's debts. But there's definitely some pride in here that he was able to contribute toward that. And I do think he loved his father. I don't think he was a perfect man by any stretch, but it seems like he really loved his family.
I think so too. That's what I got out of this.
Here is where Davy falls in love. So he is a young man. He works really hard, and it's funny. It's like every 4 weeks he's going to go see his girl. And at first it's a little Quaker girl. He finds out that she's actually engaged to someone else, and he is just devastated. He thinks he's dying.
He loves deeply every time.
think he's about 16 here.
Mm-hmm.
He falls in love hard a few times, and twice I think they're ready to get married. Like they've spoken to a pastor, and the wedding date is set, and something goes wrong, and each time he is just crushed because he is ready to be married.
Eventually, though, he decides that all this misfortune clearly is due to the fact that he doesn't have an education.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas his father couldn't make him go back to school, he decides that he is going to go back to school himself so that he is going to be more successful in his love life. He makes it for about 6 months. That is the extent of his education. And again, great line here. In this time, I learned to read a little in my primer, to write my own name, and decipher some in the first 3 rules of figures. And this was all the schooling I ever had in my life up to this day. I should have continued longer if it hadn't been that I concluded I couldn't do any longer without a wife, and so I cut out to hunt me one.
I was then about 18 years old, and he's talking about one of these girls who ends up jilting him, but he says, we fixed the time to be married, and I thought if that day come, I should be the happiest man in the created world, or in the moon, or anywhere else. But then he immediately goes to his rifle.
Yeah.
He says, I had by this time got to be mighty fond of the rifle. And it's actually really relevant. He goes to these shooting competitions. So, the Disney movie, I do think you should watch it. It came out in 1955. The guy's great. A man named Fess Parker plays Davy Crockett. Buddy Ebsen's in it as his right-hand man, who does not play a role in this book. I think he's kind of a mashup of a bunch of different people in Davy's actual life. But the shooting competitions are great. It's like in Robin Hood, right? With the arrow, and then you split the arrow. Davy Crockett's so good at this shooting competition. They pull 2 bullets out of the same hole. Initially, they think he's lost. Oh, you didn't even hit paper. 2 bullets, same hole. But he seems like he's good.
Yeah, he does seem like he's good and we know that because he wins. He talks about how he won all the beef. So meat is the reward for these competitions. And so he won all the beef. So he's feeling good. You know, he's had success here in this competition. He's got food. He's ready to get married. It doesn't go well here either.
She picks another guy. Or maybe her parents did. I think part of the motivation to get some schooling is that he wants the parents of these girls to pick him because they get to vote too. But eventually he does find a girl named Mary Finley. Funny, her nickname is Polly. Mary Polly Finley. She went by Polly. I tried to find out why. Not a clue. If it was like her middle name, it doesn't seem like a reasonable nickname to me. So maybe it had to do with her middle name, but I don't know. Mary Polly Finley.
And if you're reading the book, that won't be in the book. You've got to look outside of the book for all the names, except, well, he throws in some names, some of the other soldiers and things like that.
Especially in the war, yeah. But here with the girls, no, I don't think he mentions his wife's name at all, but they get lost. He's out, I think there's a wolf hunt that he's part of, and then she gets lost at night, I think looking for her father's cows, and they just chat all night. They have a wonderful time. He is smitten, but her mom doesn't really like him. So he's very worried. So they pick a date very quickly. He rides up to this house leading a horse and says, Mary, are you ready to go? Here's a horse for you. But the dad talks him down. He's like, no, please stay. And they actually do get married, and he's so happy.
He is. And it is kind of a classic mother-in-law trope on this one. He describes her as a very sort of stern, grumpy Irish woman who just didn't like him. But it seems like she softened to him a little bit over time, or at least the way he describes it.
Yeah. I think by the time they're actually married and maybe realized he was a stand-up kid, because he's young. He's 18 here. Presumably his wife is similar aged. He said, having gotten my wife, I thought I was completely made up and needed nothing more in the whole world. But I soon found this was all a mistake. For now having a wife, I wanted everything else. And worse than all, I had nothing to give for it. They have to make a living.
And one of the things that I was not able to really follow in this book was just how often he moves.
A lot.
Because now that he's a grown up and married and has a family, he is always moving over the state to new areas and different places and parts. Well, I say the state is still a territory at this point. And so I lost track of some of that. But it also says here that he continues to hunt. And it says that he begins to develop a reputation. I think the quote, oh, here it is. I began to distinguish myself as a hunter.
He says, we worked on for some years, renting ground and paying high rent, until I found it wasn't the thing it was cracked up to be, and that I couldn't make a fortune at it just at all. So I concluded to quit it and cut out for some new country. In this time, we had 2 sons, and I found I was better at increasing my family than my fortune.
I marked that line too.
So in the end, he does have 2 sons and a daughter with Mary, but war comes to them, and he signs up as a volunteer.
So it says, I was living 10 miles below Winchester when the Creek War commenced, and as military men are making so much fuss in the world of this time, I must give an account of the part I took in the defense of the country. If it should make me president, why, I can't help it. Such things will sometimes happen, and my pluck is never to seek nor decline office. So his ambitions for the presidency show up quite a bit from chapter to chapter. This is the first place I think I see them. But so these are the Creek Indian Wars. And there's some famous people involved in these. The most famous, of course, being Old Hickory himself, Andrew Jackson, who is the general in command of all this. But Davy Crockett is not hobnobbing with generals here. He's a militia volunteer who signs up for a 60-day tour, basically.
So the Creek Indians, there were basically hostile Creek Indians and friendly Creek Indians, but there's a big battle at Fort Mims. And this spurred a lot of people to sign up as volunteers. And he says, for when I heard of the mischief which was done at the fort, I instantly felt like going, and I had none of the dread of dying that I expected to feel. His wife begs him not to go, but he has a line about how if men always waited for their women to get on board with them going away, nothing would ever get done. And says, whether she was satisfied with this reasoning or not, she did not tell me. But seeing I was bent on it, all she did was to cry a little and turn about to her work.
Now, he's already got a bit of a reputation as a woodsman here. He's a great hunter, and people who are good in woodcraft often in this time, and even now, get set out as scouts. And so quickly he uses the term spy a lot, which I think is fun, but basically he is now a scout for this armed body. And this fits his personality because it means he gets to do quite a bit sort of on his own.
Yeah, and he makes a request of a young man by the name of George Russell, a son of old Major Russell of Tennessee, to go with him as a scout because he knows the woods, just like him. And the major doesn't like this idea. And these play a role in the movie if you watch the Disney one. But these are his people. They know how to get around. In the movie, he asks the major, like, can you make a call like a hoot owl? And the guy does it, and it's terrible. Davy does it and actually calls in a real owl. It's amazing.
That's awesome. This is Davy Crockett at his best in terms of his vernacular. So the guy he wanted, they wouldn't let him. And he said, I didn't think that courage ought to be measured by the beard, meaning this other guy thought he was too young. He said, I didn't think courage ought to be measured by the beard, for fear a goat would have the preference over a man.
What?
Goats have beards.
It took me a second. I'm like, oh, I get it.
And I also love that he uses the term wrathy when he gets angry at something. I was a little wrathy. That's just fun to me.
Rizzed up is another one of mine. Rizzed up, the salt and vinegar. But he's off scouting, and they're supposed to convene with this major at a point, and the major doesn't show up. It's a long, I believe, days before the major actually shows up where he's supposed to be. He's done it all wrong. They don't know how to navigate the woods like Davy Crockett and these other woodsmen, these other volunteers.
And I think it's somewhere around here where he returns and he warns the main force about the adversaries that are out there, and it's a really scary thing. And he says that the guy he told it to didn't seem to really be worried about it at all. But then this major shows up and confirms that, yes, this is going on. And then they got all worked up about it. And that irritated him a lot because he thought they should have believed him. But since he's not an officer, it didn't count. And it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it says, it convinced me clearly of one of the hateful ways of the world. When I made my report, it wasn't believed because I was no officer. I was no great man, but just a poor soldier. But when the same thing was reported by Major Gibson, why then it was all as true as preaching, and the colonel believed it every word. So I'm unclear, and I don't know if you know either. He talks about this as the Creek War. He never mentions the War of 1812, but that's the war that I've heard of. Are they the same, or do they one go into another?
They were going on simultaneously. So, and Andrew Jackson was a part of both of them. Later on, he's going to talk about wanting to go and fight against the British. And so that's formally the War of 1812. But the Indian Wars were going on all at the same time. And although we think of them as different things, the British were obviously allied with certain Indian tribes. We were allied with certain Indian tribes. And so there's a lot of overlap.
So there's a lot of stories about marching. They marched a lot, and they went hungry a lot. Here at the beginning, it says they have fine quantity of dried beans, which were very acceptable to us, and they have powdered corn, parched corn. They have coffee, but it runs out. They're out there a long time. And it says eventually that they mostly subsisted on coffee. There is not a lot in coffee.
There is not. Davy, though, as a scout, is often away from the main body, and he's a hunter. And so he will frequently come back having killed something, whether it's a deer or a squirrel or a hawk, he's not picky. They are hungry, and he will hunt for whatever. But this is also where you see some of his, I think, electioneering, his making himself look good, because he describes this episode where he kills a deer and then brings it back, and he's sharing this all out with everyone. And here's a line which makes him sound really good, right? Whenever I had anything and saw a fellow being suffering, I was more anxious to relieve him than to benefit myself. And this is one of the true secrets of my being a poor man to this day. But it is my way, and while it has often left me with an empty purse, which is as near the devil as anything else I have seen, yet it has never left my heart empty of consolations which money couldn't buy, the consolations of having sometimes fed the hungry and covered the naked. A little pompous, but there it is.
And I do think he contributed. He describes how he's not the only one out hunting. Anyone who does hunt, anything they get, because this is a large group of men serving together. The idea is you come back at the end of the day and you make basically a pile of the day's hunt, and then it's shared evenly. And he was definitely a contributor. He puts in stories about, as you said, hogs and squirrels and anything they could get, because, man, they were hungry, starving at certain points. But mixed in with this are references to the deposits.
They show up.
So I didn't know what this was at all, but this clearly was a hot topic for him as a congressman in 1834. He references the deposits over and over and over. It says, "We were, however, determined to go, as I am, to put back the deposits, if I can." That's just tucked into his war stories. This comes up a lot, and we can talk a little bit more about the deposits. Again, I am not an expert on this. I spent some time looking. It's really interesting. If anyone knows the actual ins and outs of it all, you should come talk to us.
I mean, politics is politics, right? And there's always things that people get worked up about, and this is his baby, the deposits, and I do think we'll talk about this more. The other interesting thing to me is somewhere around in here, he starts talking a little bit more about General Jackson and keeps referring to him as the government. Andrew Jackson is the president when this is being written. He's the man in power, and the two end up having some fallings out. But here, initially, he served under General Jackson, but he keeps getting this dig in how people refer when they talk about the government. What they mean is this one man, and you sense that he thinks that's ridiculous, that the government is not this one guy. But so he uses it as a joke and as almost an insult when he's talking about Jackson, the government.
At this point, Jackson is his general. And this group of volunteers signed up for 60 days. and they've got terrible provisions. They're cold. It says their clothes are nearly worn out, and our horses were getting very feeble and poor. So they leave. And General Jackson says, no, they can't. They cannot leave. He forbids them. He actually tells his men to guard against it and fire on these volunteers. And it says it's a tense moment. This is in the movie as well, where this group of men in buckskins come up on these. I mean, they almost look like British.
Regular army.
British uniforms, but they're the blue. This is the regular army, and they have a cannon, but the volunteers just keep walking, and these men don't want to fire on them. They fought together, so they go home. He just leaves for a while, but he does come back. But interesting that General Jackson is both his leader, but he ordered them to fire on Davy Crockett and his men. I say his men, and the men with him. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a great look. But Davy, like you say, he isn't done with fighting. And so it says, soon after this, an army was to be raised up to go to Pensacola. And I determined to go again with them, for I wanted a small taste of British fighting. I suppose they would be there. And so this is, again, where he's trying to be a part of that. And there's some pretty awful stories in here because, again, a lot of this is Indian war fighting. And so there's discussion about scalping. There's discussion about some pretty dark things. I kind of went through this fairly quickly.
Yeah, and it's war. It's on both sides. Hard stories here for sure. But the more prevalent thing is the starvation.
Yeah, that keeps coming up over and over.
So if he thought he was starving last time he was served, this time there's just no food at all. At the start, we had taken only 20 days' rations of flour and 8 days' rations of beef. It was now 34 days before we reached the place. So along the way, he's trying to hunt. He's trying to go. And at one point, there's a sick man. So everybody's trying to contribute. If they see something, they'll go way out of their way to catch a squirrel just to have something to eat. But there's a sick man. He's trying to get some food for this man. And he asks one man who's boiling a turkey gizzard. And then he finds another man boiling a turkey gizzard. But they had told him that only one turkey was found. Clearly, somebody is not sharing like they should. And it says, I told him that it was the first turkey I had ever seen have 2 gizzards. But so it was. I got nothing for my sick man. And now seeing that every fellow must shift for himself, I determined that in the morning I would come up missing. So I took my mess and cut out to go ahead of the army. There's another good phrase in here. Root hog or die. It says, go on the old saying, root hog or die. I don't really know what that one means.
I don't know what that means at all. I didn't look that one up. It is interesting, though, how he is able to find provisions. I mean, again, successful hunter. He's very good at that. But turns out there are people who have corn, and he's got powder and shot. And so he's able to exchange powder and shot, which he's got plenty of, for bags of corn and take them back to the people he's serving with. And so he comes up with all sorts of ways to find food, and he ends up making out of it okay.
And it's funny the things he focuses on in detail, and some things he brushes over entirely. He says, here I had enough to go on, and after remaining a few days, cut out for home. Okay. Like you're just...
I do enjoy his description when he gets back home, where he says, I found them all well and doing well, and though I was only a rough sort of backwoodsman, they seemed mighty glad to see me, however little the quality folks might suppose it. For I do reckon we love as hard in the backwood country as any people in the whole creation. What's funny to me is that he's not actually done here with his military service. He's still got some time, but where his people are being sent, he doesn't really think there's going to be any fighting anyway. So he pays a guy to do the rest of his service so he can stay home.
I agreed to give a young man who wanted to go the balance of my wages if he would serve out my time, which was about a month. This closed my career as a warrior, and I am glad of it. For I like life now a heap better than I did then, and I am glad all over that I lived to see these times, which I should not have done if I had kept fooling along in war and got used up at it. When I say I'm glad, I just mean I am glad I'm alive, for there is a confounded heap of things I ain't glad of at all. Mention of the deposits again.
Yeah. And the government.
The government. It's definitely a politicized telling where it's his stories and be like, don't forget the deposits. This matters to him very much.
And again, he's got big dreams for himself, I think, because he continues. But I am glad that I am now through war matters, and I reckon the reader is too, for they have no fun in them at all, unless if he had to pass through them first and then to write them afterwards. But for the dullness of their narrative, I must try to make amends by relating some of the curious things that happened to me in private life, and when forced to become a public man, as I shall have to be again if ever I consent to take the presidential chair. He really thinks this is coming his way.
I think it might have been a close thing. More political stuff in Congress later, but I think he was a reasonable candidate for a long time. So here is where it shifts more to his personal life, and this comes up abruptly that his wife passes away. It says, in this time I met with the hardest trial which ever falls to the lot of man, death, that cruel leveler of all distinctions, to whom the prayers and tears of husbands and of even helpless infancy are addressed in vain. Entered my humble cottage and tore from my children an affectionate good mother, and from me a tender and loving wife.
And I think this is legitimate as I read it. I think the death of his wife hit him hard. And then just from a practical standpoint, Davy Crockett strikes me as a man who likes to go out and do things. I don't know how good he is as a father and hanging out in the home and not going out and doing things. And so with his wife gone, that's kind of a burden for his personality. And so his solution is he has his younger brother and his family move in with him. So now there's other people to kind of help with his children, but this is not going to be a long-term solution. And he decides he needs another wife.
There's a widow lady whose husband had been killed in the war, and she also has children. And it says, she was a good, industrious woman and owned a snug little farm and lived quite comfortable. I soon began to pay my respects to her in real good earnest, but I was as sly about it as a fox when he's going to rob a hen roost. But they do get married after this, and it says that she's a wonderful stepmother to his kids and that they have a second crop of kids together.
That's right.
His phrase, second crop.
But again, as I said earlier, I can't really keep up with how often he moves. He seems to keep moving just further and further out. And so he explores this whole new area where he wants to move his family to. But boy, he gets sick, really, really sick. And how he survives a lot of this, I don't know. But it was really, I think, the kindness of others here. A number of people let him stay in their home out in the middle of nowhere and took care of him until he got through this illness.
It says he was senseless. I was speechless for 5 days, and they had no thought that I would ever speak again, in Congress or anywhere else. And so the woman taking care of him, who had a bottle of Batesman's draps, thought if they killed me, I would only die anyhow, and so she would try it with me. She gave me the whole bottle. But then he sweats it out and feels much better. He's been in this fog and fever for weeks. Batesman's draps.
I did look those up.
I was curious.
Most of the old-timey medicines, and I've seen this in a lot of other books, basically heavy, heavy opioid content. This was essentially a narcotic.
How would that fix him?
I think it just helped his pain and he fixed himself.
Senseless, speechless for 5 days, but he makes it through. But he makes his way back home kind of slowly. He's recovering. And they thought he was dead. Yeah, the people traveling with them had told his wife that he had died.
I do very much enjoy that he explains why he dwells on this story of his illness. I have been particular in giving a history of this sickness, not because I believe it will interest anybody much now, nor indeed do I certainly know that it ever will. But if I should be forced to take the White House, that it will be a good story, and everyone will look on it as important.
And I can't for my life help laughing now to think that when all my folks get around me wanting good fat offices, how so many of them will say, what a good thing it was that that kind woman had the bottle of draps that saved President Crockett's life.
He's dreaming big.
I mean, it's his book. Go for it, man.
That's right.
As you say, though, he's always looking for a new place. I think where they lived here, it said it was kind of sickly. I think it's a very wet area, and he's always looking for the next place to settle. And so they do move, and it's this place with very few people. His neighbors are few and far apart. And he says there's no order. He likes that there's space, but there's no order. So they end up setting up a local government.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually pretty impressive what they do. It's a frontier government so that there can be some ways of living in safety. And he becomes a very prominent member of this, very important in this frontier government.
He is appointed one of the magistrates, and anyone who doesn't do what they should, according to common sense laws, he hasn't brought in. There's kind of a court hearing. I mean, very unofficial, but if there's tolerable grounds for the charge, I have him well whipped and cleared. This seems to work pretty well.
It does. It's functional. There's also really good hunting in this area, so he enjoys that. But his challenge of education does come back a little bit here, because when things get more formal, he's required to submit warrants. He can't just arrest somebody. There has to be a warrant, which has to be written out. And he's got some workarounds for that, too. I mean, he writes some of them himself, but he also has people that work for him where he basically says, you go ahead and write the warrant. I'll back you up. And so he doesn't have to write for them.
It says, till by care and attention, I improved my handwriting in such manner as to be able to prepare my own warrants and keep my record book without much difficulty. He chooses to learn here, which is admirable. And basically, he's saying that all of his things stick. They were all good judgments because I gave my decisions on the principles of common justice and honesty between man and relied on natural-born sense and not on law learning to guide me, for I had never read a page in a law book in all my life.
He's very proud about that.
So you use the phrase electioneering. He says that. Politicking is in the song. He does that. This is part of his persona. And whether it was truly him or one he adopted or both, that's very much his role in politics, where he represented himself with short speeches and backwoodsy common sense phrasing, and really spoke to the people as he knew them and as he was one. And he really goes big in that. And that's kind of how the legend became a thing, especially because his hunting was so amazing.
It was epic. Epic. Here, where things are starting to formalize a bit more, this is where he runs his first kind of campaign. His first campaign, interestingly, though, is for actually a military post. These days, it doesn't work like that. You don't campaign to be appointed a colonel of a regiment. But back here, you did, and especially, I think, for these militia or smaller groups. And so he gets kind of talked into doing this, and then he gets irritated by the person who talked him into it and decides to run against him. And this is his first kind of taste of getting people to vote for him in some way.
Well, and they have parties. That's how they promote themselves, is they have these corn husking parties or these shooting matches or a hunting competition. He fits right in. These are fantastic. So I wondered if it was because they were volunteers that you were elected, because he runs for colonel. I think he's challenged to run for major, but he gets annoyed with the guy, as you said. And he's like, nope, I'm going for colonel. Mm-hmm. And it works. This idea that he had to give a speech was really uncomfortable to him, but he just gets up there, says something funny that makes them all laugh, and then says, wow, I need a drink. Yeah. I'm as dry as a powder horn. He brings almost the whole crowd with him to get a drink and leaves nobody for the other guy to talk to. It's really effective.
He's very good at what he does. And this, I think, encourages him or inspires him that, well, if he can win this one, he puts his name in for the state legislature. And so this is, again, government, but it's at the state level. This is in Tennessee. And he runs for it and he wins because he has that capability. There's some personal things that happen in his life right here, though. I don't know what it is with mills flooding, but it's a curse to the Crockett family. It happened to his father, and now it happened to him. And so he had a lot of financial troubles, but he leans into this one, too, talking about how his wife made sure that he paid everything back and that they would rather be honest than not pay their debts. It says, and so you see, I determined not to break full-handed, but thought it better to keep a good conscience with an empty purse than to get a bad opinion of myself with a full one. I therefore gave up all I had and took a brand fire new start.
And I think it's at this point that they move again.
Yeah, right.
I mean, truly, I could not tell how many times he moved either. So many times. But this is after the legislative legislative session, I determined to make another move. And so I took my eldest son with me and a young man by the name of Abram Henry. It is curious when he chooses to use names and not, because a lot of them there aren't, and there are a few. So maybe that's a political choice as well. I don't know.
It very well may be.
But water. So his grist mill gets flooded, washed away, starting over. But here, everything is flooded. He's in this new territory, looking for land, a place to live. And the water is like up over their heads, up to their chest. They're pushing down trees to climb through and make a way in this totally new place. Seems promising.
Well, he's good at this sort of thing. Him and water often don't seem to get along, but this is where he really is able to do things like hunt, and he's able to down all sorts of elk and deer on this trip. I enjoy some of the supplies he gets. So from the boat, says, and so I got the boatsmen all to go out with me to where I was going to settle, and we slap up a cabin in little or no time. I got from the boat 4 barrels of meal, 1 of salt, and about 10 gallons of whiskey.
And then he leaves his son and that kid there while he goes off hunting.
He's got enough whiskey.
Well, and he has to pay for it. I think the hunting is how he pays for it. He doesn't have just money in his pocket. It's a lot more of a trade situation. Mm-hmm. So he leaves those boys in this brand new cabin. They just slapped up and he goes off hunting. He's really good at it.
Yeah, so I am not a hunter. It's not my thing. But if you were one, you're going to love these chapters because he talks about his hunting in detail as a man who loves it and is good at it. And I mean, his descriptions of his hunts, what he gets, pretty impressive.
Yeah. And it's all powder. These are black powder rifles, which I don't know a lot, but those to me seem far more inaccurate than firearms now. And yet he gets animal after animal after animal to feed his family or other families. But his family does end up moving here with him. And it's a really isolated kind of life. They have neighbors, but they are miles away. He loves it. That's what he's looking for.
He does. And he's successful with his hunting, but Christmas time comes where it's dark and he is out of powder. He needs a keg of powder. And fortunately, there is one, but it's a journey to I think one of his brothers. His brothers keep showing up.
Yeah, they kind of follow each other, but at a distance. I think it's like 6 or 8 miles away from where he's living. But at Christmas, for we had no powder for Christmas, and worse than all, we were out of meat. And his wife says, we had as well starve as for him to freeze himself to death or to get drowned. For one or the other was certain if I attempted to go. So here she's like, you're going to die. It's not just wet. It's Christmas time. Yeah. There's snow, there's ice. And he's going to go anyway.
And there's rivers for him to cross. I mean, this is insane. But this is in many ways, I think, Davy Crockett at his best, because this is what he does. And he describes this kind of wilderness journey with all sorts of tricks, using logs and getting through the water and trying to stay dry and failing. And it's a harrowing tale.
Yeah, this line is good. But I didn't before know how much anybody could suffer and not die. This and some of my other experiments in water learned me something about it, and I therefore relate them. He's traversing snow in deep water. It's freezing cold. He is freezing and hunting along the way. He still gets a bear, I think. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into bears, but they fear him, and deservedly so. He ends up getting to his brother's house for the keg of powder, and again, they try and keep him there. You can't go home, right? You will die. But he's got his keg of powder, and he's going to go home or die a-trying, as he says.
That night there fell a heavy rain, and it turned to sleet.
It's cold, it's wet, it's snowy. The tricks that got him one direction don't work the other direction because of the way the ice is, but he eventually is able to get back with the keg of powder, and now life is good.
When I got home, I wasn't quite dead, but mighty nigh it. But I had my powder, and that was what I went for. Check. Merry Christmas.
This next chapter, all bear hunting, where he hunts all the bears. All of them.
He has the bear dream, brother. He literally does. And he says, I've never known such a dream to fail. He knows he's going to get a good one.
Yeah, not one. It's every time he turns around, he sees another bear and then he kills it. Bear after bear after bear. It is his favorite thing to hunt. He does say that bear is his absolute favorite thing to hunt. And
they use it all. It's important to remember they use it all. And just think how available and prolific the wildlife would be for this to be true. I think he kills 17 in one day. Part of it is he has really good dogs, hunting dogs who do a great job. The biggest one he gets, but then he said he actually caveats. He's like, actually, later I get an even bigger one. But at the time, 600 pounds, 600-pound bear that has to carry it all home. Can you imagine lugging one, processing it, and two, carrying it home?
Yeah, I'm not a hunter. That seems unpleasant to me.
Yes, a lot about bears.
But after some bear hunting, don't worry, there'll be more later. After some bear hunting, he runs again for the legislature. And again, this is the state legislature.
He doesn't run. A guy tells him, Crockett, you must offer for the legislature. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then like weeks later, some guy's like, congratulations, you're running. And what? He's shocked. And he tells his wife, well, I'm going to give it a go then. I'll give it my best. Seems like a setup.
It does. But, of course, he wins because he's the hero of our story. He does start to describe, though, some of the run-ins that he's going to have with Andrew Jackson. Apparently, one of the guys who was elected to the National Senate couldn't complete his term. And so there's a voting process from the state legislature for who is going to sort of take over for this. And here he goes against the wishes of the government, Andrew Jackson. And that gets him a little bit of opprobrium from people who really like Jackson. But he stands by it. He says that was the right thing to do. I always do the right thing. And he stands by it.
He's got this whole thing about he would never wear a collar. We're marked around my neck with the letters engraved on it say, my dog, Andrew Jackson. He actually ends the book this way as well.
Yeah,
I think he was actually in Jackson's camp, but there are certain things that he says no. And this apparently was one of them.
Yeah, I think he initially came into, well, when we get to it, Congress, as a Jackson follower. That was what he was understood to be. And so much of this is him defending, kind of breaking with that, certainly on a lot of these points.
Yeah.
But that doesn't go well in these political parties. If you go against the leadership, you're going to pay for it. And so he ends up running against a man for U.S. Congress, but some of this factors into that he loses. But he had enough of a challenge in doing this that he decides that at some point he's going to run again.
Well, he knows why he loses. It's because cotton happens to be $25 a hundred. And so the guy wins because he says, I might as well have sung psalms over a dead horse as to try to make the people believe otherwise, that the results of these things are going to drop the price of cotton. So he knows why he lost. And so then when the cotton goes to what, $8 a hundred, drops again, he runs again and wins.
Yeah, does better there. In the meantime, though, there's more hunting to be done and more bears and story after story after story of bear hunting.
He tries things that aren't bears. He tries boats.
Yeah.
The boats don't go good at all.
No.
So he goes back to bears.
He builds 2 boats, loads them up with pipe staves, whatever that is. And this is his journey onto the Mississippi because, well, I guess the Obion, the little river he was on, that didn't frighten him. So he's going to go to the big river. He's going to go where he can sell this stuff. Yeah, he never makes it. These boats, he doesn't know how to do anything on the Mississippi. The men that are with him don't know. They can't get the boats to shore. The current is just taking them, the current is just taking them down the river, and they eventually end up crashing and sinking, and he is only barely able to escape with his life.
Yeah, he gets pulled out from below decks and like loses his clothes doing it, gets like scraped out, but he's just happy to be alive and thanks Providence.
This is Davy Crockett. He takes that as a win. He's like, it was great. I was alive. And then he goes home. And I love with some of the bear hunts, you described his dogs. I'm trying to visualize how this would work. A pack of 8 dogs attacking a bear and then him shooting between the dogs to kill the bear.
Well, they tree them.
Okay.
So frequently he's climbing up these trees. There's a lot with up trees where they actually tree a lot of these bears. Occasionally, though, Davy has his knife out and he's confronting the thing personally.
Okay.
Huge bears.
The story he tells about that one is insane because the bear like dives into this like crevasse. I couldn't tell exactly if it was under a tree or a rock or whatever, but basically the dogs are going after its snout, right, where the bear is fighting them off. And there's like this hole that Davy can see the bear through. He somehow can't get a shot in for that. Maybe it would have hurt his dogs, but he's like poking it with a stick. I mean, he's poking a bear with a stick as the dogs have it cornered in this crevasse. And then he decides, well, if I can get with a stick, I can probably get it with my knife. And he like sneaks in and he's like cuddling with this bear before he knifes it and kills it. Just insane backwoodsman stuff.
He came in from the back end, the safe end. The dogs are fighting it. Think of it like a tunnel, like a hole. And so the dogs are fighting it from one end. He goes in from the not sharp end. And he gets this bear. And how he gets it out of the hole, I don't know. He says it's a little tricky, but he makes it happen. But bear after bear, he'll be processing one and hear his dogs take off after another one. Did I say already 17 in a day?
Yeah. And he is so proud of his numbers. So I'm going to read this quote because he gives us a count. He says, I took a notion to hunt a little more. In about 1 month, I killed 47 more, which made 105 bears I had killed in less than 1 year from that time. 105 bears. That's insane.
That's insane. They weren't all for him. He went hunting with his son over like between Christmas and New Year's, and then his neighbor needed meat. So these aren't all just for him, and they are using it. I would like to emphasize that. This is not just reckless, wanton killing. They're using them. They're subsisting on these. And it's the best meat. This is how a man would care for his family. I think this is funny. I knowed he was a screamer describing one of the bears. I don't know what that means.
I don't either.
Interesting. A screamer. Maybe he was just noisy. I don't know. But a lot of descriptions of the terrain, like these cracks, as you say, from earthquakes, and they try to sleep through an earthquake, and they think they're going to get swallowed up like Jonah in this crevasse, which that's scary.
Mm-hmm. And he describes, just the exhaustion of some of these hunts as he's been moving from bear to bear to bear to bear. It's crazy.
In one, he gets cold. It says, I suffered very much that night with cold. It's always with the water. And it says, as my leather breeches and everything else I had on was wet and frozen. But to stay warm, he climbs a tree. Up and down, up and down, up and down. He climbs a tree, he slides down. That's how he stays warm enough to not die. Amazing fortitude.
He loses count of the number of times he goes up and down the tree. I think he's a little bit optimistic in describing himself as feeling warm when he's doing that, but it works for him.
At least tired. So in the movie, it's actually at the beginning where the major comes over and they're looking for Davy because where is that guy? And his buddy's like, shh, quiet. He's grinning down a bear. Grinning down a bear. Because the major disrupts him, he ends up attacking it with a knife. And of course, takes out this bear.
Sure.
But he has a method where he tries to just grin at it because it's not expecting to see a toothy smile. Throws him off entirely.
What just happened?
So he uses it later in the war. And he's like, wow, worked on the bear. It's very funny. So try that, I guess.
No.
Grinning down a bear. Anyways.
Yeah, I think we're kind of up to his descriptions of his election campaigns and the way he interacted in some of his speeches. And maybe it's time to talk about the deposits.
What do you know about the deposits?
There was a national bank that kept the money for the United States. And President Jackson decided that he was going to pull the money out of the bank and deposit it in private banks. He thought this was a great idea. Davy Crockett thought this was a wild abuse of executive power, that it was essentially tyranny, that the president could just choose to pull the public money out of this bank, give it to whoever he wanted. And he thought this was basically a means of Jackson bribing all these very powerful businessmen, these different banks. That was a way of financing his chosen successor. He thought it was just tyranny, basically, and would not stand for it.
Yeah, there is a speech attributed to Davy Crockett in Congress that is titled something like, "Not yours to take." So yes, the deposits were a big thing in his platform when he was in Congress. And it's why it's so much in this story. I think it's a lot of really why he even wrote the thing, because he felt very strongly about it. He was trying to make it known. But this is his time as a congressman. He is in Washington City. And again, the movie's great. He shows up in his buckskins and has this really funny way that he introduces himself on the Congress floor. Again, this is from the movie, not the book, but he describes himself as half horse, half alligator, and a little bit touched with snapping turtle.
I like it. Well, there are repercussions to disagreeing with the president, especially if he's the leader of your party, your political party. And so he ends up actually losing an election after he goes to Congress. He loses the election of 1830. And some of the techniques and tactics here are downright sneaky. There is a bit of what we call gerrymandering. Gerrymandering occurs when you reapportion a district so that voters who are more likely to vote for yours, you can basically work the numbers to make the voting in your favor. And this happened against him. And then there was an especially sneaky thing that the guys were doing where these lawyers would say that Davy Crockett was going to speak at this area. And Davy Crockett was not going to speak at this area, but they showed up. A crowd showed up expecting to see Crockett. And his enemies would basically say, well, look, he didn't even bother to show up, and then say nasty things about him. I mean, there were some brutal tactics employed for his loss.
But he was in Congress 2 stints, and then he lost one, and then he comes back again. So he's kind of in and out throughout several years. Tennessee State House of Representatives from 1821 to 1823. In 1825, he ran for Congress but lost. And then in 1826, he's in Congress to 1829. And then he loses again, and he's back in 1833.
Yes.
Very much back and forth, and he hunts bears in between.
I think he prefers that.
The deposits are the thing that are mentioned most in this book as his kind of pain point between him and the government, President Jackson. But the one that sticks out and I think is most famous now is the Indian Removal Act. And so that's in here not as a main focus. That is the focus in the movie, actually, where it was a kind of pet project of the president. It says, several of my colleagues got around me and told me how well they loved me and that I was ruining myself. They said the Indian Removal Act, was a favorite measure of the president, and I ought to go for it. I told them I believed it was a wicked, unjust measure and that I should go against it. Let the cost to myself be what it might. And so no matter how much political anything is in this as he tells his story, he was the only person from Tennessee to vote against that bill. And it passed. And I believe it was kind of the start of the Trail of Tears.
I think it was.
Which is devastating. And I really enjoyed the speech that Davy Crockett gives in the movie. Again, that's not part of this book, but I picked out some pieces of it, and I want to read them to you because I think it's fantastic. So this is Davy Crockett on the Congress floor in his buckskins. Mr. Speaker, fellow members of the Congress of these United States, I've stood before you a good many times in fights and fun, and we've had a laugh or two for the good of the country and our own digestions. But you can fold up your grins and put them away, for you'll hear no jokes from Davy Crockett today. You have before you something called an Indian bill. I don't want to keep you here much longer arguing about it. You've had enough of that already. But before it comes to a vote, I just want to remind you of something. Expansion is a mighty fine thing. Sure, we got to grow, but not at the expense of the things this country was founded to protect. The government's promises set on in the Indian treaties is as sacred as your own work. Expansion ain't no excuse for persecuting a whole part of our people because their skin is red and they're uneducated to our ways. You wouldn't be doing the settlers no good voting for this bill. You'd only be making rich men out of the land grabbers and speculators that have been trying to get it passed. We got a responsibility to help it grow into the kind of nation the good Lord meant it to be if we showed that we were the kind of men our friends and neighbors figured we was when they sent us here. A bill like this would never live long enough to even get on our desk, let alone come to a vote. And there's some more that he does, but I thought it was really good. He stood up, he voted against this wicked bill.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Good for him. Well, I really enjoyed this book. I mean, I hadn't seriously thought about Davy Crockett, since I was a kid watching the show and listening to that song. And it was a lot of fun. One of the other things that did strike me, though, is that this book ends with him sitting in Congress in 1834. He dies in 1836. And so this is really close to the end of his life. And I'm grateful we have it.
Yeah. Interesting. And full of character, I think. And it made me curious about the rest of his life. So I just looked up a little bit. He runs for Congress again, and he loses. He doesn't make it another time. And so he basically says, I'm going to Texas. They had land for settlers. You could go and they'd give you parcels. He was always moving.
Always moving.
And a couple of things I read said that he was fairly bitter after not making it to Congress again. And so he thought of Texas as this kind of land of opportunity, right? More space, more opportunity there. And when he goes, though, it says he left Tennessee with a group of volunteers November 1st, 1835, eventually arriving at the Alamo in San Antonio on February 8th, 1836. He died March 6th, 1836. He was only in Texas about a month and was there for the Alamo. And there's debate about his role there. He definitely was there. He definitely fought, but in some tellings, he's kind of the last man standing, last man left alive at the Alamo before he was killed. In some tellings, he was executed by Santa Anna. Kind of the last group of men were captured and then executed in front of them. So I don't know a ton about the Alamo. Do you?
No, I really don't. The Alamo is, an incredible moment in Texas history. This is before Texas joined the Union. Texas was its own kind of independent nation at this point, and this was the big conflict between the settlers at the Alamo and the much, much larger Mexican army. And it was, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a Thermopylae type thing, right? So the underdogs that fought to the last man, and it became symbolic in a way like Thermopylae that you just couldn't predict ahead of time, and has become such an important part, certainly, of the Texas legend and the Texas psyche.
Yeah, and there was, something like 200 men versus thousands with Santa Anna's army. Just shocking numbers, shocking how long they even held out at this fort there. But in the end, they were all killed. And what I did learn, though, was that Davy's wife, Elizabeth, wasn't there. He did not go with his family. I do believe there were women and children at the Alamo.
There were.
There were?
Yes.
But his wife and kids, his wife at least, was not one of them. But she remained in Tennessee until sometime around 1853 or 1854 when she moved with her kids to Texas because basically descendants of Alamo defenders were gifted land, I think in Hood County. And it says she lived in Acton, Texas in a cabin near a schoolhouse. And she never remarried, and she died January 31, 1860. In the movie, while they're basically waiting to die at the Alamo, there's a song that they sing. And I looked at the credits, and it said lyrics by Davy Crockett.
Really?
He didn't write the song, and they did change it a little bit. But I found that at the Crockett Tavern back in Tennessee, he wrote a poem. And I actually found the words to the poem, and I think we should end with that.
I love it.
Farewell to the mountains, whose mazes to me were more beautiful far than Eden could be. No fruit was forbidden, but nature had spread her bountiful board, and her children were fed. The hills were our garners, our herds wildly grew, and nature was shepherd and husbandman too. I felt like a monarch, yet thought like a man, as I thanked the great giver and worshipped his plan.
And with that, we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.